Everybody. It's 4 o'clock, and so we're going to start. It's nice to see all of you, and I hope you've had, a really wonderful week. So we're going to open with I'll make a couple of comments, and then we'll have an open discussion or question. Anybody who wants to share their actual experiences and interpretation. And then we're going to look at one section in Module 3, which is one of the first standards, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So I actually went to the Canvas course, and there are 74 out of the 117 who have whose applications were accepted. Of the 74, there are about 40 or 50 who have completed Module 1 and 2. So what I did was I actually emailed people personally if they hadn't actually done anything in Module 1 or Module 2, which are both very, very important, especially because they actually set the context for the implementation of HB 302, which is the language access policy. So when I wrote these individual emails to people, I wanted to make sure that if there was a problem or a family issue, or there was something that was keeping them, or something that I didn't understand that wasn't made clear, that we could, actually address it. So the biggest issue is, and I actually now sent you an attached Word document, a PDF that shows the rubric for discussions. So that's one thing, because apparently people couldn't get into the announcement to see it. So I just emailed everybody the Word document. The other thing is, if things come up in your family, or if you're sick, or if something's going on, with somebody in your family, then the best thing to do is to email me through Canvas. And so, not on the announcement page. So I opened up the Canvas announcement page so people could reply, so I could find out if, in fact, they could download and had access to the rubric, which was helpful. But mostly the announcements won't have any way to reply. You'll have to email me through Canvas, and I get it directly. And not my school email, because that ends up being, kind of, what shall I say, overloaded with other issues around the state, right? So if you want to email me directly and tell me if there's an issue with anything, a lack of clarification, you should feel totally open to do that. So I'll stop there and wait for anybody to ask any kind of clarifying questions, or any kind of interpretation experiences that you've had that have made a difference, or that, you're working on the Canvas course and you're better understanding, the requirements of being an interpreter. So I'll just pause for a minute, and you can unmute yourself and then just say who you are and, where you're from in the state. And it could be a community based organization, or a family center, or a community, or a district, or a charter. It doesn't really matter. So I'll just wait for a few minutes to see if we have any questions or comments or sharing experiences. And again, we have these Zoom meetings just so we can have kind of a back and forth with questions and experiences and get to know people. And they're always posted. I think last week there was a problem with, I think it was the 7 o'clock one. So that might not have been posted. But it doesn't matter, because you can see whichever ones that you want. any questions or clarifications or comments or anything that you're wondering about, whether it's the legislation or whether something that's actually happening with you uh, in your role as an interpreter. Sonia, I see you've unmuted yourself, so do you want to, I think it's Sonia.
Yes, hi. Yes, this is Sonia with Alpine School District as the McKinney-Vento liaison. Thank you so much. Sorry, it wasn't meant to be the clapping hands, but I had a question. So on the Zoom attendance login notes, what would you like us to put the week that we did not meet, which I believe was the third week?
Yeah, just cross it out. I
Oh,
think I actually sent you another one that was in a Word document. The first one originally was, all the sessions, and it was in a fillable PDF. So then I decided, because people were still confused about what they should put, I gave you samples and
oh, okay.
I gave you a Word document. So if you're using the old form, which is fine, just cross out that section because we know that we didn't meet that week.
Okay, we'll go ahead and reprint that then. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I also, while I'm on here, just wanted to share, I guess to everyone, the importance of our role. And again, attending to the HB legislation because I received this week an email from our admin secretary in our department, the Student Educational Equity Department, that one of our leadership members is requesting some of us in the department who are bilingual to interpret for a very important upcoming meeting. And again, that just speaks to, and I really appreciate that they're mindful of the need for and the importance for these parents to understand what this meeting is about, what their role is, and or what our role is. And so I appreciate that our district is being mindful of that in the fact that they're requesting interpreters and who can attend, et cetera, et cetera. So I always jump to those opportunities because I put myself in these parents' shoes. If I didn't understand the language, it would be important for me to understand what's happening in my student's school.
Yeah, thank you, Sonia. Yeah, I think many districts are much more conscious, not only of the legislation because now it's state law, but also because, if you're not willing to engage families in a language they can understand, then why would you expect the students to have the kind of success that we want for each student? It's really about, the way in which we have partnerships with families and community agencies and resettlement agencies, and we create these partnerships that really support our children. And that's really the point. So I want to thank you for saying that. It is a very critical role and very important. Thanks, Sonia. Other comments before I share a screen with the first standard, which is about we can talk about how they're organized. Okay. So I'm wondering if you can see this.
Yes, we can see it.
Let me see if we can. Okay, so if you look at the standard, it says accuracy and fidelity. And this is in module 3 of the Canvas course. So, every standard every standard has an ethical principle. So when people talk about ethics, they talk about what they're meaning is the way in which behavior supports the standard. So the first standard in module 3 is accuracy and fidelity. And so when you look at the principle, it talks about the role that the interpreter plays. And we've talked about this before, as faithfully as possible and to the best of your ability. And without any kind of additions or, distorting the message from the administrator or the parents because maybe, you feel more sympathy with the families, or, you're trying to get across what the administrator is saying in a way that the family understands. And the word embellishment of meaning is really about the way in which oftentimes we feel like we need to be advocates for parents, especially parents who aren't native English speakers, to be advocates for them. So embellishment is like, adding on to a meaning that helps them feel more supportive. The point is you're trying to be really accurate with what is being communicated from the administrator, from the English speaking person. So do you have any comments or questions? And you're just going to have to, I can't really see you, but if you want to make any comments about the first standard and the idea of an ethical principle.
I'd like to comment. I think I can't remember which module it was in, but it was a video we watched as part of the assignment where there was an administrator and the interpreter with a parent, and the administrator was trying to find out, something about a student. Anyway, I thought about, in the spirit of being ethical of what we are doing, the thought came to me that these administrators, or anyone for that matter, who need you to interpret, count on us to be accurate. In this case, in the video, it was a discipline issue.
Yes.
And so it was important for the administrator to understand what was actually happening, or what the parent was actually doing. And apparently in the discussion, it was concluded that the parent was not being truthful. And anyway, so it just showed me how I need to be ethical in what I'm doing, because that other party or administrator or whoever we are interpreting for is really dependent on us to clearly send that message we need to send or interpret correctly.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons that you can focus on that is that the point is it's really the obligation of the school to do what's in the best interest of the child. And so if they don't really know what's going on, how can they actually do that? Right? So that piece is really important. And I think the second objective, if you look at the objectives, I think they really help. So renders utterances, of course, it's not written communication, but it's, verbal communication faithfully. It should sound natural in the target language and no distortion of the original, message. I think the thing that's challenging is when it says idiom, register, and style and tone of the speaker is preserved. I think that ends up being incredibly challenging because typically there is a certain kind of tone and formal register in formal language that is used by an administrator or a group of teachers working with an interpreter on behalf of the student with the family. So that's the other thing that's really, really important to see. It goes back to the thing that you were saying previously in the very first meeting we had was, the actual academic language of, for example, Title III, IEP meetings. So in educational settings, there's always this really formal register that's being used because it's in an educational setting, right? And so one of the ways I tried to address that is I uploaded, from the family portal on USBE, the terms for special ed and how you could actually have them translated. Okay, so I'll stop there. Anything about the academic language of educators that ends up being problematic or concerning?
I would like to share something.
Yes.
I was in the Cranes High School yesterday, and I was kind of surprised, and I was wondering because it was a lady there, and she was crying, and she was yelling, and I, go and ask her if she's okay, and she was like, "No, something happened in the school, and I really need to speak to someone." And this lady doesn't speak Spanish, so I go there and help her to find someone, and then they be able to help her. But I just saw that she said, "Who's gonna help me to translate everything I wanna say?" And then the principal said, "We have someone here." And when I looked to the person that is gonna help her, he was like scared, and he can,
Mhm.
well, I just wonder, the lady was, very mad, and she was yelled. So I was thinking, if I, to do this, it's kind of complicated to be like impartial or neutral to do this. And even the person who's gonna help her was scared. So I was like, this is something that we need to practice. And I don't think that is easy, not even for the person that is helper.
Yeah, so thank you so much, because this is really a wonderful point. Sometimes when parents come and they're not helped, especially because the school, might not have the kind of interpretation and interpreters available, when the parent comes. So that's why I think the HB 302 is so important, because the language access policy that should be adopted by every single school board from every district and every charter makes it clear that this is an actual obligation. The other thing is, and I think I've mentioned this before, is because this is a civil right for families, federal and now state law, to actually have communication in a language they understand, then interpreters and interpretation and translation services has to be paid with state funding. And so then the question ends up being, how do districts allocate their funds to schools to make sure that those funds are available so that interpreters are immediately available when they're needed? So oftentimes many of these things come down to how resources are aligned and what the priorities are. So the next one I think is a really important one. The interpreter advises all parties that everything said in the encounter will be interpreted. If any party requests that the interpreter refrain from interpreting, and this happened with someone from last week's conversation, interpreting all utterances, then the interpreter is obliged to inform all other parties of the request and seek direction. So the reason this is important, it goes back to this idea of being sensitive to what the families need, right? And then as being a responsible interpreter, letting administrator and the educational side know what has been requested and seeking from the administrator the kind of direction that should be used. Okay, Martha, I see your hand. You want to speak up?
Yes. Hi, Christelle. And I just really appreciate you. Thank you. I think you give incredible insight, of course. I mean, it's just really, and just to hear everybody else's experiences is very helpful. I am an educator, I'm a teacher in the classroom. And so this fidelity, accuracy, and fidelity, I'm actually looking forward. Like, I feel like I'm well, I am looking forward to this because as an educator myself, I'm I'm often one of the involved parties, with parent-teacher communication, and so to step into and to step into the interpreter's role and away from the teacher role is kind of refreshing for me
Mm-hmm.
because um, I don't need to contribute anything, and I should not. Not that I don't need to, but legally, I should not contribute anything and just say it as it is. And so, this objective is I, to say that I like it. I know that's not the right way to
Yeah.
put it,
Right.
but I just think of situations within the school where people have stepped out of their lane and have complicated matters.
Yes.
Um, and so this fidelity and accuracy is enlightening. For me, it is encouraging for me because I, having seen others complicate matters by stepping out of their lane and into a lane that does not belong where they should not be, it's like, I don't even want to go there and I will not go there. I will just interpret and just be that conduit. That term has come up in the modules. And
Mhm.
so personally, as an everyday school teacher, again, it's just kind of refreshing just to say I am a conduit now and an advocate still and still making a difference, just a different role. Yeah.
Yeah, Martha, this
So,
is like an incredible insight, and thank you for offering it
Mhm.
because, this whole idea of, and someone asked me also that they were an administrator and they're going to be an interpreter, and then the question is, well, is this going to be a conflict of interest, which is kind of the thing that you're bringing up.
Mhm.
It depends on the way in which the roles are designed, and if everybody is clear about the roles. Right? I mean, I think that's one of the key pieces that's really important. And then making that clear as an interpreter where your lane is, right? What you are actually going to do, um, which I think is always kind of an emotional challenge, uh, for lots of reasons, obviously.
Yes, and I'm excited. I spoke to my principal today, and we are learning as interpreters in training protocol, and it's so important for us. In talking with my principal today, I want to create a protocol sheet to distribute, to faculty and staff here, so that they're like front loading them. If you do need an
Right.
if you do need an interpreter, then where my position where I am even in the meeting is not a shock to you. You're prepared for this. And so I just think that's also important to educate our faculty and staff as to the protocol so that they're aware.
Yeah, I think that's really an excellent, and when you get the protocol done, make sure you share it with us because I think that's the other piece because you're actually being trained and you're developing your skills in a way, that shows that you're a professional. That's really the point of being trained and then receiving a certificate. Luz, I think you had your hand up, and then after that, Frezia. Or whoever wants to speak first.
I can go ahead and go. This is Fresha.
Sorry.
So then oh, are you there?
Yeah, Fresha, go ahead.
Can you
Okay.
hear me?
So I have a question then, I guess just for my own clarification. I'm the registration secretary. I'm the registrar at my school. However, because I'm bilingual, I also fulfill the role of interpreter because we have so many in need of that. So my question is that appropriate? And what do you recommend as far as guidelines into establishing the proper role?
Yeah, actually, I think that it would be really wonderful if you could train all of our registrars. Because this is one of the biggest issues for families that aren't native English speakers. When they go to register, it ends up being kind of a nightmare for them. And there are lots of assumptions that are made about them without any kind of translation services. And maybe they're all translation services, but they tend not to be as clear. So I think actually we have a lot to learn from you based on your role, Because I would say of all the needs that we have, which includes IEP meetings and dual language services with students identified for neurodiverse needs as well as special education needs, you know, and even student support meetings with students who are learning English or refugee students. The biggest need, I would say, besides all those meetings, is actually at registration. So I think you have an opportunity to really become really skillful, and then we can learn from your experiences as being an interpreter as well as a registrar. Because registration, from all the experiences that I've had in Salt Lake and going and monitoring registration a long time ago, and then still hearing things that still happen, 25 years later, registrars play a vital role in working with families. In fact, we even, Wasatch School District and Carl from World Languages, we're thinking of designing registration training for registrars to help them better understand the opportunities for families with students who are learning English. So I'm not going to give you a guideline. I'm going to suggest that you become really skillful, and then you see what issues come up at registration, because interpretation at registration is really critical.
And I appreciate that. I know that one of the things, aside from the language barrier, they are so relieved when they realize that they're speaking to a registration secretary that speaks Spanish, but is access to a computer.
Yes.
And then having the forms in the,
Yeah.
our district does a good job of providing, forms, but there are still forms that are, just like yesterday, day before, they had a field trip and the teacher sent out a permission slip, but it was all in English. And so the one Hispanic student that she didn't hear back from, and I says, well, the mother probably doesn't understand. And so it's an opportunity, I think, for me to help educate the teachers as well, and maybe help them to facilitate the forms better to the parents. But I know that I've had a lot of opportunity. I've only been in this position now. This is my second year, but I've done more interpreting this year than last year. So the numbers are growing, and I know that it's, for me, it's very rewarding, because I know these parents are just, they want to take care of their kids and they want to do good by them. And so I know that there is a lot of opportunity. I do go from a Spanish speaking registrar to translating in with my vice principal when there's discipline issues, and also IEP meetings. So I'm kind of, my job is a little multifaceted, even though it's not in my job description. I do it quite a bit.
Yeah. So how do you pronounce your name? Frazia?
So it's Fresia in
Fresia.
Spanish, but
Fresia.
we've Americanized it to Fresha. So I will respond to either one.
Okay, Fresha. Thank you so much for adding this. And, I'm going to keep you in mind when we start thinking about how we would do, modules and supports and training for registrars. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, one more thing, just that we found the last year that we did, Mrs. Perez, who works in our restorative justice room, last year we launched a new program where we actually provided her services as an interpreter at a table on back to school parent night. That was huge success. Good. And so anyway, that was just one thing that we've done that really helped the parents quite a bit. So thank you.
You're welcome. Are you in Washington County?
Yes, ma'am, I am.
Yeah, the reason I'm asking this is I saw some really amazing rooms for restorative justice opportunities. And maybe we can talk about that. Just keep this, in your kind of in the forefront. And then maybe next week when we do a Zoom, you can tell us a little bit about the restorative justice rooms in Washington County, because I think There are a couple of other places that have like timeout rooms that are really beautiful. I know there's one in Murray that I just love. But you know, the idea of interpretation for families when kids end up being, you know, experiencing mediations and restorative justice is really important. So thank you so much for bringing that up.
You bet.
Okay, so somebody else's hand is up, but I don't know whose it is. So is it Liz?
Hi. Yes, it is. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Sorry, I was having problems with my sound here. Yeah, so Fresia, thank you for the input. I know it's one of the things that we see a lot, the problems when our families try to register. And, you know, it's not, schools don't always have access to interpreters. Our district has contract with actually a company that is called Propio that really has proven, you know, very helpful for instances like that with families. And you know, we had a teacher come to our office and get more information, more cards. We have cards for this Propio. It's like an on-demand interpretation. It's used only for communication, usually from parents to, I mean, the school to the parents. But in this instance, they had a little child that was just like very upset. He was yelling and screaming and crying, and they couldn't figure out what was happening, how to help this child. And so so they immediately started using Propio, and then they found out that it was a miscommunication. So the child, you know, they were taking pictures, and so they told him that they were going to go get a photo shoot. And the only thing this poor child heard is shoot. And so he thought that they were lining up and they were going to get shot, right? And we have to keep in mind these kids that the situations they're coming from are traumatic, and so here again the importance of us like doing this and trying to better our ability to interpret for families and children, and to bridge that gap, you know, with this miscommunication. I think that was just so sad to hear that this child thought he was going to get shot, right? And if it had not been for that communication, that interpretation, I don't know what, you know, what could have happened to him. But again, so I think it's just very important to keep in mind what we're doing, and the importance of communicating clearly, and the ethical responsibility that we have to not add or edit, but just, you know, even though we wear many hats, just keep that hat when we're interpreting so that there's no miscommunications, and help other children and their parents.
Yeah, Liz, thank you so much. And are you in Ogden? Because I know they use Proprio.
In Alpine School District.
Oh, good. So
Mhm.
Alpine is using it too.
Yes.
And so is Tooele and a few others. So that's
Mhm.
really great. And I think the whole idea of better understanding and developing relationships with families and their children and their actual previous experiences is really important. I remember one time there was like, I think it was a fire drill or something like that.
Mm.
And, you know, and I can't remember which country the kids had come from, but, you know, they fell down under their desks and they were crying because they thought they were going to be bombed,
Mm.
you know,
Yes.
and that's the whole thing. I mean, you know, we have families who have come from, you know, the most incredible circumstances. And so to be sensitive means that you actually create a relationship with the students and their families, so you understand their prior experience. I mean, that's really, you know, that's really important, especially with the families that are coming from the children that we have that are from the Ukraine, the children
Correct.
who, have just come from Afghanistan, if you can just even visualize their experiences in these war-torn countries where their lives are being threatened, it's really about creating a compassionate, warm heart, and what that looks like for all the children that we, have the privilege of working with.
Absolutely. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for adding that. I see a couple of other hands. There's Fresia. I don't know why I have a problem saying that. And then Sonia, but let me, before you talk, let's look at number 3, because I think number 3 is really important. The interpreter retains English words mixed into the other language, as well as culturally bound terms which have no direct equivalent in English, or which may have more than one meaning. So this is the real challenge, right? Whenever possible, the interpreter will attempt a translation of that word to provide the listener with an idea of what the word means. So, this means that the more you practice and the more skillful you are, the better you can do this so that communication is clear. Okay, the people that have raised their hands, I can't really see them, so because I'm looking at the screen, you should just unmute and make your comments.
This is Sonia, once again from Alpine School District. Just talking about number 3. Whenever I've interpreted, and like I said, I thought I knew all the vocabulary in Spanish because I am bilingual. I pull up one of my best friends, SpanishDictionary.com, and in listening to the party I am interpreting for, if there's a word I don't know in Spanish or
Yeah,
can't think of it right away, I will pull it up I have my computer with me. I immediately pull it up on SpanishDictionary.com because I want to make sure that I'm saying the exact word that needs to be said and that I'm not making something up in place of what I think it might be.
yeah, that's really an excellent example. And so I'll make sure that in the next announcement, I'll actually put that resource into the announcement so people can have it. So what is Spanish? What is it again?
It's called SpanishDictionary.com.
Okay.
It'll translate from English to Spanish and Spanish to English.
Okay, perfect. I think that makes,
And I actually use it if I need to translate something in Word. I mean, the text in text form. But I use it, of course, when I'm interpreting as well.
thanks, Sonia. Really
Mhm.
appreciate that. So let's look at number 4. The interpreter asks for repetition, rephrasing, or explanation if anything is unclear. So this is a real skill, especially if administrators are in a hurry, right? So you have to actually stop them. Upon recognizing that the interpreter has misunderstood the communication, he or she identifies the misunderstanding and requests direction from the parties involved. So this goes back to, in some ways, the thing that Sonia was saying as well, and other people, that yes, you have to be incredibly skillful, you have to be direct, and you have to be sensitive. You can't misinterpret, but one of the things you have to do is to ask for repetition or rephrasing or explaining if you don't understand it and can't find the language to actually communicate what the meaning is. So all of this is like incredibly challenging. I mean, it's incredibly challenging. I mean, it's challenging enough for people who are native English speakers to make themselves understood, let alone, interpretation from one language to another. The 5th. Oh, Sonia, did you want to say something?
Sorry, yeah, but before you go on to number 5, about number 4, I have found myself in doing this, it has to do with being honest with yourself.
Yeah, yes.
And not cheating the system or cheating myself or whoever I'm interpreting for, because I have to be honest. I have a responsibility to make sure that communication is clear. So I just wanted to make that comment.
Yeah, I mean, I think that goes back with this whole idea of, always learning from your experiences and then, adapting and changing to develop your skills. So when you're confronted again with this experience or this situation, then it ends up being, a much easier way to be faithful to what's being communicated. So that's very well said. Thank you. Okay, number 5, the interpreter ensures that the meaning of gestures, body language, tone of voice is not lost by replicating what has been seen or heard by the interpreter. Now, this is another one that's really challenging because in different languages, there are different gestures and body language and tone of voice, is really challenging, especially if you have a parent who's very frustrated, right? So they're frustrated, and obviously the educator or the administrator or the English speaker can tell. You don't have to actually say, that the person is frustrated because it's obvious that they are. So, Francia, you have your hand up.
Yes, I just wanted to make a comment on this point. My counselor, one of my counselors, he is so caring and he really cares about his students, and he does not speak Spanish, and so he uses my services quite a bit. But I know one of the frustrations is that he can't convey his genuine concern because through the interpreter. So I'm hoping it's appropriate, but I try to convey that in my
Yeah.
facial expressions because it is so important to him, and that's something he's communicated. So when I translate for him, especially when it's an emotional topic, especially when he's trying to convey his genuine concern for that student when he's counseling with them, that's huge because the person being interpreted for can't convey that in the language he wants to. And so I really think there's a lot of value in being able to express the emotion behind the message. Especially for, like I said, my counselor, he says, I just wish I could convey how important it is. And I says, well, I will do my best to make sure they understand that you genuinely care and are worried about them. So I know that that's really important.
Yeah, so thank you for saying that, because that goes back to this idea of the kind of relationships that you have the opportunity to build, across languages, which is, again, really important. If you have someone who's incredibly compassionate and passionate about their commitment to the child, then it's really good in a way in your tone or your gestures or whatever it is to make sure that that's communicated. There's one other person whose hand's up, so they can, I don't know who it is, but they can just start.
Patricia from Ogden School District. Today, actually, not today, this week, I put in and practice that one. It was good to try into those things that we learn, but it's funny how you have to, set up your mind to apply those learning things about translation. This week, the mom is just when I was doing the translation, she just looked at me. I don't understand what he's trying to say. So I was like, I can explain it to her. So I'm going to wait a minute. If I'm, doing the interpretation, I cannot add. I cannot. So I just, the same face that she gave me, I give it to him. I don't understand what you're saying. So the teachers back to me and I start explaining, and I explained to mom, oh, okay, I got it now. So it's work, but you have to correct yourself because the habits that we have in the past, of course, is easy, oh, I know what they're talking about. Let me explain to you what he's trying to tell you. However, if you were going to do the interpretation, you have to catch yourself, correct, and do it. It works, but it's funny how I find myself trying to explain to the parents, oh, that is what he's trying to explain. So just by experience, yeah, it's hard.
Yeah, Patricia, that's really excellent, because again, it's not your responsibility to try to explain to a parent what the administrator is trying to say, but it's your responsibility to tell the administrator that the parent doesn't really understand what they're saying, right? And then you can interpret the explanation of the English speaker, which is really important, because in some way you're actually educating the educator or the administrator. You're educating them as well in relationship to the kind of language that's used to better communicate with parents. So that's like a perfect example. Number 6 is the interpreter uses a mode of interpreting appropriate for the setting. In most interview situations, spoken language interpreting is done in the consecutive mode. Okay, so again, this relies on, the practice and the skill of the interpreter based on the particular setting. And so that's why so many of these objectives help you better monitor the way in which you're interpreting so that there's a positive outcome for the educator as well as the parent related to the needs of the student. The last one is the interpreter performs summary interpretation. Summary, some of the elements in the communication are not interpreted. Now, a summary interpretation, you would have to be careful. And I think when you become even more skillful, if there's something that you could even say to the administrator, I would like to summarize the meeting. How would you do that? And can I do that? Something like that. So again, because you're actually educating the administrator as well as helping the family better understand how the educator is communicating. Okay, so we're not going to go on to standard 2, so I'm going to stop sharing. Patty, you have your hand up. Do you want to say something?
No, sorry.
Oh, that's all right. So I just want to say this has been a really exciting session. You've been like fabulous talking about your own experiences and then talking about what you're learning is actually having an impact on your interpretation skills and your ability to better monitor your own behavior, your own ideas, your own habits. There's nothing wrong with having habits, but if like you're stuck in your habits and the results are not, the results that are really the most beneficial for the educator, the schooling opportunities, the educational settings, and the family, as well as to benefit the child, then it ends up being, something that you don't know where your place is, the family doesn't know what you're doing, the educator is, not happy with what's going on because the family doesn't understand what they really said. So it's a great opportunity to become a really skillful interpreter. And it's just a privilege for me to actually be with you on these Zoom meetings. Do you have any other questions? Because we're gonna leave, Sonia, we're just gonna leave a little bit early. Sonia.
Just a quick comment, and I think I can speak for everyone that I personally appreciate this course because I know some of us have mentioned already, you got to think about all these tools now that we are being equipped with when we are in a session of interpreting. And I appreciate, okay, yeah, no, I better not add anything, or I better not give my opinion, or I need to make sure I emphasize the same tone, etc. All these little tools, that's amazing. We're being equipped to be more professional.
Yes.
And I think, like I said, we can all appreciate that. And the outcome of that is that these parents or whoever we are interpreting for, as well as school staff, there's a trust. Besides to add to that relationship, there's a trust that comes with this, that, they trust we know what we're doing. And we will look more professional to them.
Yeah, I think, with a certificate that says you've gone through these experiences, you were skillful, and, you have that like stamp of approval from the Utah State Board, here's your certificate, ends up creating this whole kind of level of professionalism, that is an honor to your abilities in having multiple languages, which is really, again, a great opportunity for all of us. Any other last words before we leave? one last thing. At the end of November, by the end of October and the 1st of November, people have successfully completed this course, the Zoom sessions, submitted everything, and have done the modules and responded to their colleagues. When you get your certificate, then I'll start another cohort and new applications will go out. So I'm really depending on all of you to get a large group of people because we want this expanded, right? We really want this to make a huge difference with our families. And the people who are really committed to doing the advanced certificate program, the level 2, will be negotiating, I hope, for a different kind of pay. So in some ways, it's like preparation for a career opportunity that creates interpretation services as a profession. So I just want to thank you for your commitment and your dedication and hope you have a good week, and I'll see you next Wednesday.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Estrada.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Thank you.